Hello, my name is John Kusku, and I am going to speak to you about guiding a visually impaired or blind cross-country skier. Here we are in my basement in Commerce Township, Michigan. I am a two-time Paralympian in the sport of goalball, winning a silver in Rio and fourth place in Tokyo. I'm now taking up cross-country skiing and here to share what I have learned so far about the skier and guide relationship and how it works best. I am a B2 athlete, which means I have a very small amount of usable vision. A B1 athlete has no usable vision, and a B3 athlete is someone who is legally blind but has lots of usable vision. All three can be guided. Definitely a B2 or a B1 athlete pretty much needs a guide. A guide is a skier who skis in front of the athlete, making noise in some way, which we'll talk about, so the athlete knows what's coming up, what's happening now, and can stay pretty close by. The most common way that a guide lets their athlete know where they are as they're skiing is with a couple common phrases. So the number one is hup, 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 hup. And I find it best when my guide is doing that in rhythm with something in their skiing, maybe with every left ski, or if we're in a really long straightaway, maybe every fourth ski, something of that nature. If we switch to double polling, then the word hup becomes the word pull. So every time my guide pulls, they're saying the word pull, which tells me the frequency and where they're at. The other really important thing the guide needs to do is tell me what's coming next, and then tell me when they're doing that thing. So if there's a left turn coming up, the guide would say, left turn coming up ahead, left turn. And then as they're doing it, they would say step left, step left, step left, as they're doing that step turn. That tells me, okay, if my guide is doing it at that point, then when I get to that point on the snow, I need to be making my step turn at the same time. They should also let me know about uphills and downhills, other skiers, potential obstacles, things like that. The biggest barrier for me, the biggest challenge I have is with the tracks. So regardless if I'm trying to use the tracks or not use the tracks, I can't see them at all, ever. So knowing where they are when we get to them is really important information. So we're coming up to tracks, we're crossing tracks, we're gonna cross tracks, things like that. As we get to the tracks, it is very hard to get into them smoothly. So my goal is to just get in them as I get into them. I don't try to rush it. If I don't get in them well and we're just skiing with maybe 1 foot in the track, that's totally okay. A common command that we use as we're skiing is over right or over left. So if my guide said over right, that means my right foot is in the left track. So I need to step over one to the right to get that foot in the correct track so that I can get my left foot into the track. And honestly, the best thing that can happen, the thing that guides me best into the tracks, if we're trying to get in, is my guide skiing into the tracks and narrating when they're getting in. So, gliding over the tracks, I am in the tracks, and then at that point I know, okay, well, if they're going that direction, then the tracks must be here, and it helps me to find them and get myself into the tracks. The other really challenging thing with cross-country skiing as a blind or visually impaired skier is the downhill. Downhill can get pretty fast. It's very easy to go down if you make a very small mistake. And so with most downhills, I feel most comfortable doing what's called a pole grab. So my guide will take their pole, and we usually use right hand just because for consistency. So take the pole in their right hand and just stick the point of their pole backward toward me at about waist height. I will grab the pole with my right hand and then hold on to that pole to know where they are skiing. They're not really supposed to tow me. The guide isn't supposed to tow. It's just a guide. And so I'll just tuck in small, keep my knees bent, stay low, and get down those hills. And then when we get down to whenever we're done with the hill, they'll say release, I'll let go of the pole, and we'll go back to normal skiing. The other time that a pole grab is really helpful is in areas that are like tight, like narrow, lots of turns. So I think about coming into a shooting range in a biathlon, or before or after a race where you're just trying to get in or out of the race area. A pole grab is sometimes really helpful because it can keep the communication a little simpler. So I have a couple things to show. So the first one here, I have a couple of bibs. So when you're skiing around, letting other skiers know that you're blind, you have a blind skier and a guide is really helpful. So one of these bibs says athlete and one of these bibs says guide. And so it's a really helpful thing to have matching bibs that say something like that to let other skiers know what's going on, because otherwise they honestly have no idea. The other piece of equipment I have here is a microphone and speaker system. So this is essential really in the guiding process. So this speaker goes on the guide's back, clipping onto the belt. So there's a nice belt clip on this model. This one's a waterproof one. The speaker plugs in. This wire you'd probably want to tuck in at least through your bib. You might think you just need to put this on over your neck like this. The problem with putting it on over your neck is that the microphone's going to stay here, and when you turn around to glance back at your athlete, you will not be speaking into the microphone and anything you say will be lost. So it's really important to put this on in a way where the microphone is going to stay right by your mouth, so that even when you turn your head, that microphone stays right by your mouth. And if you need to control the sound, the volume of the sound, it's pretty easy to just move the microphone away from your mouth or closer towards your mouth if you need to be louder. You might feel a little self-conscious about your voice being amplified behind you to your skier, but it really is important. It's really helpful for us to know where you are, and it gives a consistent sound source. So your voice, as you move your head around as you're talking, changes position, but a speaker, right at your lower back is stationary. It gives a really good place to follow. It's extremely helpful. The other thing I'll say is that when you are guiding, a lot of times we want to either say left or right, turning, that sort of thing. I recommend not trying to do that well turned around. So if you're skiing, you glance back, you notice something that you want to communicate, turn forward before you communicate that. And the reason is, it is very hard to get left and right correct when you are facing backward at somebody else. So look back very quickly, frequently, get information about where your skier is, but then when you give that information, come forward and do it forward. A couple other ideas are things that I've talked about with my guide is the word gap. So if the blind or visually impaired skier says the word gap, that means that there is a pretty large gap between the skier and the guide. And then another thing the skier can say is if you're getting in close, you can say, I'm pretty close, or coming in hot, or something like that, I like to give affirmation to my guide. So when I'm doing good, I like to say doing good, not too often. Obviously, as you get tired in a race, it's harder to do. The other thing that's really helpful is when the guide says what type of skiing they're doing. So if you're in a flat and your guide is V2, so they would say V2 and then hup, 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 with every left kick. And then if they switch to V1, because we're in an uphill, they could say I'm V1, I'm using V1. If they switch to herringbone, they could say herringbone. If we are on classic skis and they're just double poling, they could say, just poling, double poling, pole, pole. And if they switch to striding, they could say stride, and then, use that hup command for every maybe fourth step. So hup, 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 depending on how that's going. Another thing that can be really useful is distances. So as a guide, if you're happy in the metric system, you could use meters. If you like the imperial system, you could use feet. But letting your skier know how much longer it is for something. So there's 10 more meters in this uphill, or in 20 meters we'll have a left turn, or something of that nature. Giving that heads up, then saying when you're doing it is really, really helpful. So the last thing I wanted to demonstrate was that pole grab. So I'm going to stand up. Let's see. I found my pole. So if I'm the guide, I have my pole in my right hand. I'm using it to ski. when it is time for a pole grab, I'm going to just stick this pole behind me. I'm going to reach it straight back behind me. I'm going to let my athlete know the pole is there. I might say like, pole is extended. And then as I am the athlete, I'm back here skiing. I'm trying to find this pole. I'm going to reach forward. When I make contact with the pole, I say the word hit. And then when I slide down and grab the pole, I try to grab it as low as possible. I'll say, got it. And then at that point, I am, maybe I am skiing a little bit. Maybe I'm using my left pole to give myself a little bit of push to stay right with them. And then as we get into the hill, I'm just tucking in and staying low and trying to stay directly behind them and listening for any instructions. So that's that pole grab. Then when we get to the bottom of the hill, my guide would say release. And at that point, I would release the pole. So again, I'm John Kusku. If you ever have any questions about this, feel free to reach out. Thank you.